patriotism, faith, national unity, education, fiscal responsibility, civility, the values that define America. Fascinating stories and talks from America-loving patriots dedicated to preserving freedom, opportunity, and justice. Welcome to the Friends and Fellow Citizens podcast. Welcome back, everyone, to episode 138. This is part 2 of our conversation with Sarah Selip. If you haven't listened to part 1 already, go to the link down in the show notes below, and you can catch up on the conversation and come back anytime you are ready. Just as a quick reminder, Sarah Selip has almost a decade of experience in public relations, coalition building, and strategic communications. She's also a former congressional communications director, has spent a lot of time sharing her work on many major news sources. Last part, we talked about her experience on the Hill, as well as about some of the members of Congress she had previously worked for, as well as the state of social media usage when it comes to members of Congress. In part 2, we will be discussing her firsthand personal experiences on January 6, 2021, her thoughts on January 6th, but also we will be discussing her work and purpose with her own company, the 917 Strategies. She is an amazing inspiration, I think, for a lot of women in communications and politics in DC, so I hope you will stay till the end to listen to her story and the amazing work she is doing for countless people out there. And now let's get right back into our conversation. Sarah, I want to now turn to a topic that obviously, you know, it's a difficult topic to talk about, regardless of where people were, you know, on that day. But obviously, we met technically on January 4th, 2021. And I'll never forget, when I was working with your office, I picked what I thought was an arbitrary kind of week, because, you know, generally, you know, it's pretty quiet, you know, from the basically with the transition, everything from election day. Well, actually, I should say from the end of the year till inauguration day, it's pretty quiet. Well, that wasn't the case, obviously, for me. And I want to kind of ask you what your general feelings and thoughts were on January 6th. We were both literally in the same office, in the same room in hiding, in the same spot where we were with other staffers, other members too. Just share what you can about your experiences from there, and maybe some takeaways that you have 3 years after that.
So let me do a little bit of Wayback Machine here. So on November 4th, I think it was November 4th, Jody became really, really passionate about election integrity. And on December 10th, decided that he was going to call for Raffensperger to resign. And that became his entire thing, like his entire fire. And between the day after Election Day until January 5th, we did, I'm lowballing here, probably about like 250 interviews. And Jody was leading the electoral objection for Georgia and among others. So Tim, the chief, and RLD, myself and Jody were exhausted because like we were probably on like 4 hours of sleep a night for months on end. And that was our whole bread and butter, coming into the office on weekends, which I did anyways, but I'm a total workaholic. So on January 6th, Jody had, I think, 15 interviews scheduled. And Jody's the kind of guy where when he dives into something, he's all in. So we wrote his remarks for the floor. We were focused on process, everything like that. And when it comes to something like that, it's a huge deal for his career. And if you're looking at the process to the electoral objection, if somebody's leading it on the House side, they need to have a counterpart on the Senate side. So that was all we cared about. This is just so wild to think about because it feels like, I don't know, years ago, but also yesterday. So just a little background of what happened that day. So Tim and I had this agreement that anytime we needed coffee, we'd get it for each other. We were exhausted. Like Tim and the LD and I have the best relationship. Like we are so, so, so close even to this day. But we were at that point where like about to like slap each other. It was like really contentious and Jody was exhausted and we were drilling things into him. And so when things happened, um, if you think about it, we were in the Cannon building and the first bomb that they found was right outside our building. And we were evacuated. I didn't have anything with me except my phone and 2 coffees and a donut. I had only been to the Rayburn building with Jody, with staffing, and Tim immediately called me and he's like, hey, we need to go to Rayburn. We need to go to the Gold Room, which is the beautiful room overlooking Capitol Hill where a lot of events happen. And so we got there. We have no idea what's going on. Just like got there. And you know this. We got USCP alerts. Like we got tweets. Like you get them every 5 minutes and you're kind of I want to say jaded to it. Like, oh, there's a suspicious package. Great. USCP handles that. But so Tim is like, he's really good with like crisis management. And he's like, okay, just meet us there. And I'm like, I have no idea how to get there, but I'm going to try my best. And I have 2 coffees, don't have my work phone, no idea what to do. So we go to the Gold Room and it's really loud. Nobody knows what's going on at all. Like Tim won't tell us even what's going on with the bomb thing. And we're standing at the windows and all of a sudden we see people walking up the hill and it looked like ants swarming. And this is like immediately after like all of the BLM protests, like we're used to it, et cetera, et cetera. And it was one of those days because of the electoral objection that everybody Ubered in because traffic was going to be a mess. Immediately after that, like, we're just like, what's going on? Whatever. You know, you start hearing like bangs and like, we're used to hearing flashbangs with protests. Like, that's not crazy. But we find out later that those were bombs being detonated, which is insane. So we didn't see them actually storming the Capitol, but immediately after like the coast is clear, we go back to our office. Nathan, our CRLA at the time, and RLD were monitoring the TV. And I mean, I was too. I literally don't stop working ever. Like, I can't stress that enough. Like, I was watching Fox, I was watching the floor, and out of nowhere, you see everything go to a standstill and you see, like smoke or something. Like, it was just really weird. And everybody's ushered off the floor. Jody's still in his office, and we start getting knocks on the door to evacuate immediately. We're like, okay, cool. Like, no idea what's going on. But we go down to the Dunkin', the famous Dunkin', and nobody knows what's going on. And USCP is just like, you need to get out. You need to get out. We're like, okay, fine, whatever. Like, we have no idea what's going on. Like, news isn't covering it, etc. We get the go-ahead to go back to our office, and immediately we got another knock on the door, a frantic knock. You need to evacuate now. You need to evacuate now. And we decide to go to the oversight room, which we've spent a lot of time in, and we still have no idea what's going on. I'm monitoring Twitter. C-SPAN is at a standstill, and we're just hunkered down in there. And this is like one of my first experiences with Sherman, by the way. He was such a champ. We're just like, what's going on? And Tim got a puppy 3 days prior, so we had a puppy to help us. But we were trying to figure out what's going on. And from the electoral objection standpoint, like Jody was supposed to go on the floor. Like he was hyper focused on it. And he was with Andrew Clyde at the time, who was just recently sworn in. And which is so wild. And so we're there for a few hours and we're just like waiting to see what happens. Kelly Loeffler had just lost and it was just absolutely insane. And to fast forward a few hours later, like it's 11 p.m. and we're just so confused about what's going on. Like nobody knew what was going on. And outlets didn't cover it until later in the night because obviously like nobody knows at all what's going on. Um, and I remember sitting in Jody's office with Tim and Tamlin, and we actually were with Andrew Clyde's staff that entire time, who they're our closest friends. Most of our staff has overlapped with them, or they work for them. Like our former LD is their chief. Anyways, back to it. Um, Literally, like the entire time Jody was telling me, he's like, I had no idea. I was still thinking about the electoral objection, like even in there, like all I wanted to do was go on. And so at 11 p.m. that night, they decide to reconvene. And McConnell's like in tears on the floor because we just lost the Senate. And they decide to go through it. And we're on the Hill. I mean, Jody was on the Hill doing this until 3 in the morning. Tim was like, Sarah, go home. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And so after that, like, we had literally no idea about the bombs. Like, there are always bomb threats and stuff like that. And again, jaded. So after that, like, we were just so confused. And Brian Sicknick was like a close friend of the office. And when you work on the Hill, you know every single USCP officer. You see them every day. They love your dog. Like, if you're watching TV, even now in USCPs there, it's like, oh, that's like Joe. He's always at like the Cannon, like front door on New Jersey. Okay, so it's like, you feel bad for them. And even then, like, nobody knows, honestly, still what happened. And one of McCarthy's promises when he became speaker was to release the full tape. And I don't know. It's one of those things where they went after Trump because, of course, they were just going after Trump. But even now, I'm just like sitting back, like that day was a lot. It was a lot. And there are a lot of conspiracy theories. I have my personal thoughts and musings, but like from my personal standpoint, it was like weird. It was especially because we had no idea what was going on at all. Like Twitter was at a standstill. I think the first outlet to cover it was like One America, which is like crazy. So we had no idea what was going on until the next day when we visited the Capitol, and there was like glass everywhere. And they're like, it wasn't cleaned up. You could still see like bullet holes from the rubber bullets and stuff like that. And I think that's like the majority of it was just like how real it became. And honestly, like going back to it, like the USCP officers were champs. And it's so weird seeing them like beaten up. Like one of them lost an eye. Brian Sicknick was on the Senate side, and a few of our staffers had worked on the Senate side and saw him every day. And so it felt very close to home. And I remember that was extremely traumatizing for one of our staffers because you build such close relationships with them. And again, like nobody knows what happened because McCarthy fell through on his promise about doing this after the political theater was the January 6th committee. Like, I don't want to see Adam Kinzinger cry all over the dais. Like, I just want answers.
Well, Sarah, first of all, thanks so much for your frank sharing about that. And I actually did a whole episode about that about 2 years ago. Still, just echoing what you're saying, it's still wild, like as you were saying. And I'll put it this way: when I was watching what was going on with the limited tweets and footage that was available and the broadcasts and whatnot, because we had a TV in that room there, you feel, as you were saying, I really had such a profound new respect for Capitol Police, not just like as any law enforcement agency, but a particular, a very special law enforcement agency that was protecting a very sacred building. You know, just less than 2 years before, I was showing constituents around the rotunda and the crypt and showing them the paintings and you know all those memories, showing them the House and Senate chambers if we were lucky. You know, these kind of memories come back to you, and it was a helpless feeling, I'm not going to lie. But the thing I got out of that day, among many things, but I think ever since then I've found, I will say I found a renewed motivation to reach out to others, to promote civility, to promote conversation, these kinds of things. You know, I just it's really so important, as you were talking about, Sarah, when you were discussing the value of of having close relationships with people in your office and with other offices, the kinds of hygiene standards or the formality standards that one should have when it comes to social media usage. I think those things really contribute to the larger solution or package of solutions that we need in our country today to improve our
Right.
politics.
Right. And even then, like, January 6th has really split up our party. And I don't know if you chalk that down to like the conspiracy theories of like the Marjorie Taylor Greens of it all or the more moderate. But it was all such a profound experience. We never in a million years thought this would happen. And like when you see the places that you walk every single day, stopping your boss to the floor, et cetera, it's scary. And it like it it caused a lot of problems with the fence too. Like Pelosi with the fence, she wouldn't build a wall, but she would put fences everywhere. And the security that cracked down around it was just absolutely insane. Like, not in a bad way, like we all understand it, but there was so much overkill seeing like tanks and like military grade things, like blocking off everything. But the world was at such a contentious time that after Black Lives Matter and the billions of damages caused by the activists, like, I'm not going to say like I'm one of those people whose all lives matter like all the time, but it's the people who cause the chaos, the looting, smashing buildings, et cetera, et cetera. I just don't have respect for that sort of thing, and especially like the pro Hamas messaging they have now. It's like it's the people who marched that actually matter, not the activists who destroyed DC and burnt down like police precincts, you know? So in that way, you see billions of dollars there and you see things like the Capitol riot, insurrection, however, like listeners want to take it. Like, I'm not trying to sway people in one way or another. I'm talking about like my own personal experiences. And there are a lot of staffers who felt the same way. And honestly, like, it gave me a lot of respect for the building and the pomp and circumstance and everything like that. And again, USCP really cracked down on it and protected the members and kept staffers at arm's length because you don't know what's going to happen. Like it happens once. What if it happens again? We were just at such a hard time in our history that everybody just was fighting all the time. And I think this caused a lot of infighting in the party too, because they're the Trump loyalists, they're the moderates, they're the people who understood what was going on, but everybody just wanted answers. They still haven't caught the person who put the bombs around, like in front of the RNC, the DNC. I think there were about seven. But when I was leaving the Capitol that night at 11 p.m., like there was Capitol Police and like National Guard pulling up the street in front of the RNC. Like we had no idea what was going on. And that way it was scary. Like USCP and FBI and National Guard who showed up to protect the staff and the members, like that is unmatched. Like our military really showed up to protect us. And regardless of like what actually happened that day, because like again, McCarthy never released the tapes. Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, and the rest of that crew, they politicized it. But we don't have answers. And there are a lot of conspiracy theories, and I love conspiracy theories about like most things, but at this thing it's like I just want common sense solutions and action oriented things. And McCarthy failed like the Republican Party and the country as a whole by not allowing the transparency there.
Exactly. And Sarah, just on the last question on this, so what do you think everyday Americans can do to alleviate the kinds of divisions that we're seeing now, especially after Jan 6, and really just at any point, what message do you have for the citizenry of the U.S. here to improve the conversation, improve the dialogues, and as you're saying, I think is very true, which is getting answers.
So I think it goes back to all politics are local. You need to vote from down up. Like people often forget that you need to get actively involved in your school board or even just like the delegates in your county. Like you need to actually make an active effort to elect people who represent you and who would be best for your district. Regardless of like what you think about like, oh, they like you don't understand the issues, become educated, find out why you're voting for them. And not just because like if you're young, because your parents gave you that those talking points, they voted to educate yourself. And regardless of how that goes, you just need to learn your own beliefs and figure out how you vote personally. And so you know why you're voting, how you're voting, what you want the future to be, and what you think is the future of the country, and how to make it better for you, your kids, and it's about securing it for future generations.
Amen to that. And also subscribing to Sarah's blog post too.
Yeah.
Don't forget that. Well, Sarah, that's a great message to leave. Now let's turn to obviously 917 strategies. And I recall, I think you started this a while ago, right? If I'm not mistaken, you obviously brought it back, especially after you left the Hill. But I remember, well, I was curious about the people I was working with. So I actually, especially since you had told me that you had been involved in politics before, and I believe you one time did an interview. I think it was with I think it was actually on The Hill, like as in the publication, but like they had like a TV interview. I remember at an appearance. So I didn't tell you at the time, but I did. I did look you up on YouTube just to kind of figure out who am I working with here.
Oh my gosh. That was one of my worst interviews of all time. Ironically enough, we talked about the Iowa caucuses and Kristen Gillibrand and her pro-choice agenda, pro-abortion agenda. One of the things that I'm very, very proud of in my life was starting 917 when I was 23 years old. And that was bold as all get out. So 917, just because it's, an interesting name, 917 is Constitution Day. 917 is my birthday. And 917 was the day that my great grandmother married my great grandfather. And she was extremely active in politics and Daughters of the American Revolution. And I just found out recently that she decided to leave Adar when I think it was the 1930s because of the women's rights movement and voting, because it just didn't align with her beliefs. She wanted women to vote. And there were a lot of issues in that way too. Like Eleanor Roosevelt resigned from Dar because they wouldn't let a biracial singer sing in Constitution Hall. And my family comes from like a long line of Republicans. I talked to you right before, but my family actually comes back to, this is so wild to think about, but my family came over to America in the late 1600s. And believe it or not, the one of my ancestors was in George Washington's cabinet. His son or grandson was Aaron Burr's law partner. He married a Schuyler, was close with Hamilton, and which is just so wild to think about. And so my family was always very politically involved. Our family house is the oldest in New York, in Albany, and my goal in life is to actually buy it. But yeah, so on the other side of my family, my ancestor Philip Livingston was one of the delegates in the Constitutional Convention, and he signed the Declaration and the Constitution. So when I found this out, I was like, this is truly my calling. I'm not from New York. 917 is the area code, but it's like, it is so personal to me. I work in politics and I was born on Constitution Day. And being a Republican and a young girl, I was like, okay, hot pink branding. This is like Republican, but young. So I was 23 when I started it in 2019. And I was so lucky because I worked with major conservative organizations, grassroots activists, and pundits. And I actually worked on a movie with my good friend, Benjamin Watson, who is a former Patriots player, and he's just the best. He's so pro-life. But beyond just doing PR, one of my passions is creating a mentorship network for young women on and off the Hill. When I first started in politics, I had a female boss I hoped to be a mentor, and she didn't like me. I was really young. I was 21 when I started working for her, and she just didn't like me for whatever reason. Um, but for a long time, because I started during the Trump administration, it was difficult to find a mentor in the communications field because it felt so extremely competitive. And while I was on the Hill, it was kind of isolating starting during COVID. And I know this sounds kind of weird, but I didn't really have friends outside of the office until September 2020 when it started to open up a little bit. That sounds so lame, but even just like a few months ago, I was talking to friends in Freedom Caucus and even outside, and they agreed with me. Like, it is so hard to talk about being like a strong woman in politics, like without a mentor. You don't really find your voice, and you're competing against like men in a like dominated field. Like, there are so many women I know who outwork men, and they're so much better. But it's the confidence, it's the networking, it's creating a like-minded group of individuals to get together, network, and just build that out. So in January, this month, I started a monthly brunch for women in comms on and off the Hill. And I love it. This is my passion project. I love coalition building. I love bringing together. I'm the most social person you've probably met. And I literally like don't stop working ever. And I have a blog, and people are starting to ask to write for it. So I'm launching an editorial website called 917, writing it out. And just so people can write for it and have that in the confidence and not be aligned with a PR firm. So yeah, I'm really, really passionate about that. And 917 is my focus now. It was back in the day, and it's what I'm going to do in the future. I started it when I was young. I reopened it. Like, it was so bold to do it then. It was so bold to do this now. And nobody expected it. Like, when I first started, I was like, okay, consulting is like what everybody thinks about doing. And I thought about going back on the Hill, but it just wasn't my thing. Like, I never thought I'd work there. And I have the best relationships with everybody there, but I can serve politics in a different capacity, like political activism, political commentary, everything like that, but also building something for the girls in my generation and even like below. I actually have some people who go who are older than me, and like a lot of my personal mentors are even just friends. My whole thing is like finding your tribe. You can't just like go after the people that you want to be your mentors without finding out like what your vision is with everything. Like, you need to figure out yourself, your values, what you want as your career trajectory to build out in that way. You can't force yourself into a box. And that's something I realized on the Hill. Like, I realized that I never wanted to be a chief. I never wanted to do anything like that. I didn't want to work on a committee because it wasn't my passion. There's so many other people who would love to have that job and honestly probably be better at it than I could. And I wouldn't want to put myself in a box because I just kind of ran through the gamut of like policy and everything. I hit 3 different members, a moderate, a Freedom Caucus member, and a Texan with an R24 district. So I had a pretty like big net of things. And I figured it'd be better to serve the movement by creating things that I didn't have for myself.
That's wonderful to hear, Sarah. I remember when I was working with you, I had a sense, and I didn't tell you this at the time, but I had a sense that you had a very entrepreneurial kind of spirit, that you were not afraid to put yourself out there as Sarah Selip on a television screen or on a radio broadcast or on a podcast episode. Like, and the fact that you wouldn't be anyone else but yourself, and to be one to convey your thoughts and to try and help other people the way that you have helped plenty of other people, including myself. That is really, really inspirational. And
Thank you.
when I saw the news and I saw that you were starting up 917 again, because again, I had heard of 917 even before, when I was kind of, again, looking up to see who I was working with.
When you were
But
stalking me.
yeah, a little bit. It was more of like it was more of open source intelligence. That's how I would
I got it.
call
I
it.
got it. I stalk everybody. I'm like an FBI agent.
I was really pleased to see that you're taking on this project, and especially to help other women who are involved in comms on or off the Hill. I think that's going to be really great for politics too, because especially when we bring in fantastic talent from all different kinds of backgrounds, bring that to DC. I always see that DC needs to constantly strive to be a better reflection of the rest of America. Although it gets often challenging, especially given the kind of place it is. But to see people like you doing that, knowing that other people like I've had on the podcast, including Dave, who've gone on to do entrepreneurial things, and now you're embarking on this journey yourself. I just couldn't be more proud of what you're doing right now.
Thank you. I'm the kind of person, I mean, you know this firsthand. Like, I get bored and I'm like, okay, maybe I'll start another company. Like, it was probably like midnight. And I was like, maybe I should just build an editorial website. Maybe I should like start selling merch. Maybe I should, like, I get bored and I'm like, okay, what can I sell people? What can I give like my friends? Just like cheeky little stuff. Like my first brunch, I gave out a mug that said, I'm billing you for this conversation. And,
Oh no, I'm
like
gonna get a
I
bill
don't
pretty
stop.
soon.
Oh, seriously. And like I have a lot of amazing plans for it. I'm starting to get speakers in the queue for my brunches and stuff like that. And it's capped at 12 people right now. And I am so blessed to have like a wait list bigger than I ever thought I would. And honestly, like I was joking about this with friends, which this actually happened the other day. I was at Target on Sunday with some friends, and my one of my clients called me and we decided, hey, let's start a publishing company. Like you leave me alone for 15 minutes and I decide to like create another thing for myself. Like at the moment, I'm starting a newsletter, a Facebook group based on my network. I have my new website, starting to get people to write for blogs. I literally never stop. And my sister's a life coach, and she was like, why do you think you have like really terrible work-life balance? And I'm like, Stacey, it's because I can't shut my brain off. And she goes, no, Sarah, this is soothing for you. This is a passion for you. And it's not like you're burning yourself out, like working on the hill and trying to figure out your. So yeah, that's just kind of who I am as a person. I don't stop, and it's not for me, it's for other people.
One quick question: is Lily going to be involved? Lily is Sarah's golden doodle. If that's the name of the dog.
Yeah, mini golden
Yeah,
doodle.
mini golden doodle. By the way, adorable dog to do ear rubs on when I was interning on the Hill. So I forgot to shout out to Lily and the other two dogs we had, Freya and Rocco. I will say that experience has changed the way I see the workplace. If you don't have furry friends and animals there, it's not as cool as an office. I think that's just my opinion, and I'm sure Sarah will agree with
I
me.
used to joke that Lily was my intern, but she's basically my boss at this point.
She,
Like she hangs out on the Chase lounge on my couch, and I'm like, okay, her corner office. And even now, like she's sitting next to my desk. Like I couldn't do anything without her. Like she keeps me sane. And I just told you this before we recorded, but we had a bunny come in like shortly after you left. Like we had a free range bunny, and Lily is obsessed with Dublin. He's a lion head rabbit, and Lily would hop after Dublin. It was like the cutest thing in the world.
My goodness. Well, Lily going from intern to boss, that's farther than I would have come on the hill, right?
Right.
Well, she was amazing. So obviously, I hope she'll be an integral part of 917 because she
Oh
has to
yeah.
be. I proudly endorse Lily to be at least a special advisor in the.
Oh, for sure. She's my senior policy advisor. That was so bad. I'm
Oh
sorry.
my gosh. I knew that was coming. I knew it was
No, you
coming,
didn't.
Sarah. Two final questions. One is the second one is a little faster, but the first one is, yeah. And for every interview episode we do, we reflect on the values of Washington's farewell address. So on values of patriotism, faith, national unity, education, fiscal responsibility, civility. Out of all these six, which ones do you think are most applicable to our conversation, but also just to how you feel about the state of politics today? What we can do as American people to advance important conversations like these, including conversations about coffee and donuts.
So the big thing that really stood up to me was, I guess, political factioning. We see that like all the time, and people don't want to work together today because there's no incentive, even in the Republican Party. Bipartisanship used to be something you sought out, and now it's a four-letter word. There was actually just a study done that the most popular bill has just as much of a chance of passing as an unpopular bill. People literally have, and I came back to or I said this earlier, members of Congress have little to no effect to get things passed because there's no incentive to. And this goes to like even common sense legislation.
Wow. Yeah. And we have a lot of, I think, a lot of work to do on these elements, like comes to national unity or when it comes to fiscal responsibility. I mean, gosh, that comes up every now and then, doesn't it? When this number called the trillion starts entering into the conversation. Now it's common now. It used to be that we were freaking out about what was it, 8 trillion or whatever it was. And now it's just a number, and it's
Exactly.
unfortunate that we've come to this point. We don't realize. I did an episode about how much $1 trillion is. You're not going to even believe how much $1 trillion is unless you visualize it.
That's what I do. But even like today, most of the country, like with the record debt, massive inflation, the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan, they still want to ask questions about like our alliances and funding of foreign wars with this trillion we're seeing that's being thrown around, like the words being thrown around, like, the price of eggs. But like we should support our allies, but does that mean supporting foreign wars? And our party is so split on this. Washington warned us about overextending ourselves in foreign interests. So if we got out, like Washington said, if we got wrapped up in entangling alliances overseas, like circling back, like Britain and France's perpetual war, we'd become a pawn to those nations. And this is so prevalent with Nikki Haley and Biden and everything like that. So we're spending so much money and energy on making sure that we're involved in foreign wars when we could be securing the border. We could be working on massive inflation, and even like 117th Congress, we were seeing elected Democrats just give Biden blank checks. And I think that's really what made them comfortable with throwing out the word trillion. Like we have so many other priorities right now, like securing the border. Like why aren't we doing things domestically instead of involving ourselves in foreign wars? Like support our allies, but does that mean supporting foreign wars?
That's an important question, and no doubt that I just think in the larger debate, we really have to think about what is our vision for America's role in the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Have we had a real conversation about that? We seem to live so much in the moment, and yet I want to see American interests getting, I guess, accomplished, or in our relations with allies. We want to see we want to see certain things. I think we have to be very clear on that vision to ourselves, at least. No doubt that I think we'll continue to have these important conversations about the extent in which we should be doing X or Y and all that. So I'm hopeful, though, that I think we will better define, I should say, the role that America plays. And I think there's a lot to be involved in, but I also think that there's, as you were saying, right, we'd also need to take in consideration the constituents, the people who are voting for the members we talked about, obviously, earlier in the episode. Well, the final question, Sarah, and I have to say this has been an amazing conversation. I just want to say I completely lost track of time, which is a good thing. It's almost like it kind of, when I get in these kind of conversations, it's like you're in a casino. There's no clocks all around, right? So you have absolutely no idea where time has flown. Tell us what people can do to learn more about 917 strategies and how people can get connected to learn more.
Okay, so my website is 917strategies.com. Same on Twitter, Instagram, and you can follow me on Twitter at Sarah Selip, SarahSelip as in Peter. I'm funny. Do it. My political takes are great. Lots of Barbie memes. Well, I mean, that's kind of worn out at this point, but still, I think I'm funny. You should follow me. Sherman likes my Twitter.
Just as a word of advice to listeners, do what Sarah tells you to, because I enjoy. I put it this way: I enjoy it when Sarah tells me what to do, because I find that the dividends really pay off. So.
Oh, and I highly suggest following my dog Lily on Instagram. It is Lily on the Hilly. And it's Lily with 2 L's, like Lily Pulitzer, Lilly, on the Hilly, like, Capitol Hill. She's really cute. You can get some behind the scene content of what it was like to work in Congress, thinking about writing a children's book about dogs on the Hill. We'll see. That might be a later project, but yeah.
Sounds great, Sarah. Well, Sarah, I'll let me close with a few words here. I really appreciate your time on the podcast. I really feel like you've explained so well the way that you operated on the Hill, especially on the comm side, which is never an easy department, at least from my experience, is never an easy department. So I commend the people like you who navigate that environment. We talked about, obviously, your experience on January 6th and the kind of implications of that. We talked about, of course, 917, as well as about how amazing dogs are, right? Like, especially when it comes to making government work. I mean, I'm looking forward to the amendment where we actually put on paper that dogs and furry animals are essential. I guess maybe that kind of covers under the 14th Amendment or something, like equal protection clause. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
if you need a friend in Washington, get a dog.
That's right. And we have a beautiful German Shepherd, so I can attest to that.
I'll send you a 917 bandana.
Ooh. See, this is what happens when you listen to Sarah. You get all this free stuff.
Okay, you're making me want to do more merch. I'll just make it just for you, Sherm.
Sounds good. I've inscribed Sherman Tank or Sherman Worm.
Yeah.
By the way, only Sarah is allowed to. Well, Sarah's one of 2 people in this world who can call me Sherm the Worm. Outside of my folks, but my folks don't call me Sherm the Worm. But I just want to say I thank you so much for all your thoughts and everything. I want to really emphasize this point to the audience, that the kind of influence that you had on me in 2021, I'll never forget. And it wasn't just the year ofs with Lily and all that, although that certainly helped a lot. But it was really the kind of office culture environment in that office that I think is one of the big reasons why we're still connected. It's because you gave me such a comfortable environment to work with, especially with all the responsibilities that you all had. Knowing that I was going to obviously make mistakes, but learn from them. I have to say, it was just an incredible experience. And the kinds of things that you shared with us today, especially since this is such a unique perspective, what you provide to people. And I know that with 917 strategies, you're going to really, really excel and be a role model for current and future women in politics, because I can tell you that
Oh,
that is going to be a defining force for sure, even bigger force than it already is.
I hope so.
I just can't put into words right now just how happy I am for you, and I just once again, the last big shout out to the Heist office for giving me an experience I'll never forget. And I certainly learned from my two stints on the Hill, one for a Democrat office and this one for a Republican office. I've learned collectively so much from these kinds of people, regardless of our differences in opinion on certain things. But the fact that I know there's all these people who are working towards a larger goal besides personal gain, I think it means the world. It means the world to any staffer, to anyone who's interested in politics. So, Sarah, thank you so much for coming on the program. And I just really appreciate, once again, the time you've taken to be on the program on Friends of Fellow Citizens.
Of course. Thank you.
And that's a wrap on this episode. Thank you all so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. The links that Sarah mentioned will be down in the show notes below. Have a great rest of your day and rest of your week. Don't forget to subscribe to Friends of Fellow Citizens. And as always, a great day in America is always better when we are with our friends and fellow citizens.